if there's one slide that I'm going to tell you to take away with you today, memorize it, put it into your head, go off and develop it, it's the bidders template. That is a rock star of a slide. That slide absolutely rocks. What you do is you get an auction property, you write down every bid, you write down the name of the buyer that made the bid, you write down where the buyer came from, and not where did you see it. Never ask that question, because people always remember the last place that they saw it. The question is, where did you first find out about this property? Because that cuts to the chase. And then what you do is you write down the source and you say, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, let me just actually show you a few case studies. Now let's talk about 27 Smith Street, Bondi. That went to auction. It had a reserve of $1 million. The first bid came in at $940 from Stephen. Then we had a bid of $950 from Kerry. Then it went to Susan at $1 million. Then it went to Daniel at $1,050,000, and the bidding kept going. And then we sold it for $1,105,000. Now let's have a look at where the buyers come from. So Kerry came from the Wentworth Courier. Sharon said that she got the email alert, and so on. See, I've even tried to be not biased. I've even actually put the competitor on the slide there, right? But the whole key here is this, that you can say to them, I'm happy to go ahead with any marketing that you want, but every time we take out a source of media, we are also potentially taking out a bidder. And that slide really hits home, because they begin to say, you know, have a look at that. Like, let's assume that this vendor did not advertise in that source. That means they would have lost that bidder. So the picture itself is able to illustrate that. So I urge you to use visual case studies showing bids, sources of bids. The other thing that I absolutely urge you to start using is the 3 visual slides, because I've run these to death, but I actually think that they're just absolutely critical. And the first thing that you should say to a vendor is, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, let me tell you, you've got 2 choices when listing with a real estate agent. Let me tell you, when you've got a plumber, you can get good plumbers, you can get bad plumbers. You can get good electricians, bad electricians. You can get a really great lawyer, you can get a shit lawyer. And in real estate, it is no different. You can get a really great real estate agent, or you can get a poor one. There are plenty of poor ones in there, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, because the barrier to entry to real estate is very low. If you've got a pulse rate, you can get into the business. So, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, I'm going to identify you and show you some of the things that you need to be really mindful. The first thing I'm going to ask you is, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, when your house comes on the market, I'm going to ask you, how do you want your house to appear in the press? I'm going to show you 4 options, and then I'm going to ask you to tell me how you feel about those options. Option number 1 is a full-page ad. Now, unfortunately, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, not every house is suitable to a full-page ad, because some houses simply don't have 4 or 5 great features about them. So we actually don't recommend that you take that version. I'm pleased to say that your property would qualify. The fact that you've got a great living room, your facade is nice and traditional, and people are going to like the LED lights and the original intricate woodwork. The fact that it's got a great pool and the fact that you've got polished floors mean that if you choose that, we can do it. Some of our vendors choose option number 2, which is the half-page version. As you can see, we still use a hero shot, we still use 2 images, but it doesn't have the oomph and power of that full-page version. Some of our vendors choose the quarter page, and in that instance, you only get to put 1 shot in there. That is really suitable to houses that have only got 1 thing going for them. Now, let me tell you, Mr. and Mrs. Vendor, when someone would see that shot there, the quarter page of the swimming pool, one of the things that's going to go through their mind is, I wonder why they're not showing anything else in the house. The front mustn't be good, and I wouldn't want to confuse the market with that option. And then we've got the 1/8 of a page option, and this is for those that are on a budget and can't invest too much in marketing. So what you actually do is, you don't actually do it on a marketing, you don't actually do it on a computer, you actually have them laminated, sitting there on the dining table, You put them down and you say, so let's have a look. Do you think the first one makes the house look best? Do you think the second one makes the house look best? Do you think the third one makes the house look best? Or do you think the fourth one makes the house look best? You shut up and say, what do you think? That's it. You wait for them to come up next. Because the response that they give you will then trigger which path you'll go.